The prairie at night was a world of silence, where only the whisper of the wind and the call of distant owls kept a man company. Colt Harding, a lone cowboy with a scar on his cheek and eyes shadowed by memory, guided his weary horse across the plains. The stars stretched endlessly overhead, cold and sharp as watchful eyes. Colt rode with the heaviness of a man who had buried his past beneath the dirt and dust. Yet that night, his solitude was broken, not by the wind, not by the night birds, but by a faint cry carried on the storm. He followed it, uncertain, and what he found would change everything. At his cabin door, lantern light spilling across the snow, stood Clara, a young widow in a worn dress, shawl pulled tight, clutching a child swaddled in her arms. Her eyes spoke of desperation, of a journey too hard for a woman alone. "We have nowhere else," she whispered. Colt's rugged frame filled the doorway, suspicion etched across his features. But when the child stirred, letting out a soft cry, something within him bent. He gestured her inside. The storm howled outside, but inside, a fragile new bond began to form, though Colt barely admitted it to himself. Inside the log cabin, the fire crackled, casting golden light across the wooden walls. Clara's voice hummed a lullaby, soft yet carrying sorrow too deep for her young years. Colt sat silently at the table, his eyes fixed on the child as though staring into a mirror of his own unspoken grief. The baby's gaze, bright, knowing, unflinching, pierced through him. He tried to shrug it off, yet the silence between them was heavy with a truth neither dared name. Close by the hearth, the infant's eyes gleamed faintly in the firelight, blue too old for such a small child, filled with a weight Colt could not name. His calloused hand hovered near, trembling as though touching the child might break something buried deep inside him. He withdrew shaken, yet still watched the baby's every move. Something about those eyes carried both comfort and terror, as though they alone remembered what Colt had spent years trying to forget. Then the storm came, fierce, relentless. Thunder rattled the walls, lightning seared the dark, and in one flash Colt saw it. A soldier's ghostly figure, rain streaming down his hollow face, uniform in tatters, staring in through the cabin window. Colt staggered back, shotgun in hand, while Clara clutched the baby to her chest. The storm howled louder, as though it had carried voices with it, voices of the dead, voices Colt had prayed he'd never hear again. Shadows lengthened unnaturally across the walls, their shapes twisting into the forms of soldiers. Colt fell to his knees, pressing his hands against his head as the whispers grew louder. The Bible on the table glowed faintly in the lamplight, but even holy words felt powerless in that suffocating darkness. Clara's whispered prayers trembled in the air, her voice almost drowned by the storm. Still, the baby watched silently, its eyes steady, unblinking. The cabin shook as though the earth itself sought to tear it apart. In the heart of the storm, Colt saw a face he knew all too well. Jacob, his younger brother, standing pale and spectral, torn uniform clinging to his ghostly frame. Jacob's hollow eyes fixed on him, pointing an accusing finger. The weight of years crashed down, Colt's choices, his silence, his guilt. He collapsed to his knees, tears streaming as the voices of countless fallen men swelled around him, demanding to be heard. Then the child cried out, its voice splitting the air, glowing with a strange blue light. The shadows shrieked, exploding into brightness as if banished by the infant's wail. Colt reached out, trembling, touching the child's tiny hand as though clinging to salvation. The cabin convulsed with storm light, beams groaning, the air thick with supernatural force. Colt knew this was no ordinary night. This was judgment, and this was grace. When dawn came, the cabin lay battered, scarred, and marked with burned handprints upon its walls. Smoke curled from the hearth. Clara sat slumped in exhaustion, the child resting calmly in her arms. Colt leaned against the scorched beam, face pale, clothes torn but alive. Outside, the prairie stretched in quiet morning light, as though washed clean of the night's horror. But Colt knew better. The silence was only borrowed. Days later, Colt led Clara and the baby into the nearby town. Whispers followed them. Villagers stared, some afraid, some pitying. Mothers pulled children close. Men muttered of curses, of foolish cowboys who carried death home with them. Colt walked tall, though grim, the weight of their judgment heavy on his shoulders. He had made his choice. He would not turn back. Years passed. Colt, older now, with gray streaking his hair, worked the prairie with the boy by his side. 10 years old, the child had grown strong but quiet, his sharp blue eyes too knowing, his silence unsettling. Colt taught him to mend fences, ride horses, hunt. Yet sometimes the boy would pause, standing by the riverbank for hours, unmoving, as though listening to voices only he could hear. Colt loved him deeply, but unease never left his heart. One evening, under the rising moon, the boy stood alone in the tall grass of the prairie. The wind bent low, carrying whispers through the night. His lips moved softly, the words spilling out with eerie tenderness, "Mama." His eyes glowed faintly, catching the moonlight. And though no one else was there to hear, the land itself seemed to lean in, listening. Somewhere beyond sight, perhaps she still waited.